Hey guys, welcome to week 3 of the NVIDIA Pro-Am tournament brought to you by NVIDIA GeForce. We're going straight into game number 1, but let's do some quick introductions. My name is Dan Fodan Cho, and today I'm joined by Kevin Monk Dong. Nimsh is on vacation as he gets ready for Story Cup 3, which is where I am right now. Kevin, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great. Great cast over the weekend with the Xfinity Hearthstone tournament, and we'll begin
Thank you,
today with
man.
another great match in the NVIDIA Pro-Am tournament between Tides and Lifecoach. Now, we saw a lot of Tides over the weekend, and he brought some pretty interesting decks, but unfortunately, you can't see it right now, but he's not bringing his Giants Mage into the lineup. It's a little unfortunate.
Yeah, we have a great lineup of players today, and they're going to be once again battling out in best of 5 conquest mode. So pretty much what you've come to expect. And we're going to start things off with Hunter versus Warrior to begin things. Now, Lifecoach is the Hunter player, I believe, and Tides is the Warrior player. I don't think
I
I don't think
believe,
Tides would start off with the Hunter, would you?
I believe actually that it's Lifecoach as the Warrior player and Tides
Oh,
is
is
the
it?
Hunter player. Yes.
Sorry,
So,
POV
so
had background then.
Just to go over the matches we'll have for you today, it's going to be Tides versus Lifecoach coming up first. Then we'll follow it up with Kalento versus Sixo, and Sixo will actually be playing directly from Steve's Story Cup. Then we have Ping Ping Ho versus Tice, and finally we will have Trump versus RDU. So the lineups for the first players, Tides will be bringing Hunter, Druid, and Warrior. So that's why you see the Hunter right now. And Lifecoach will be bringing Mage, Druid, and Warrior. And it's going to be his signature Mech Warrior. Lifecoach's signature Mech Warrior.
Yeah, that's cool, man. To see that Mech Warrior trying to get introduced here. Now, part of what's cool about NVIDIA is that since it's a week to week, but there's not eliminations this early on, people are allowed to experiment with a little bit. Then we get to see cards like Warbot and see how good or not good they are. In this case,
Now,
I'm leaning towards not good, Monk.
well, you say that people are experimenting, but Lifecoach has actually been using this Warrior deck quite a lot on his own stream and in tournaments lately. So I guess he thinks it's pretty good. I mean, Lifecoach has been known for like sticking to the same decks over and over again. He has his signature Druid, his signature Control Warrior. He loves Handlock, and of course he brings Mech Mage to pretty much every tournament. But this is kind of a new addition to his rotating line of lineups, bringing a Mech Warrior.
Yeah, I think what Mech Warrior does is surprise your opponent more than anything. The burst is still really strong, and if you can control the board, just like any mech deck, it's really powerful. I'm looking at cards like Screw Crank Junk Clunker. Am I calling it correctly? Screw Crank, whatever that card is. Because
Yes.
it's amazing amount of board presence, similar to Houndmaster, but I feel like its stats are distributed in a way that's so annoying. And because of the mechs gating a lot of tempo through Mech Warper, Hunter's going to be in a difficult spot if they can't find the exact damage to kill soon, um, considering that Warrior can race as well.
Yeah, you're never in a good position when you put a Wolf Rider on the board and you're considering hitting not the face, especially when you're considering hitting a 1/3, which trades pretty favorably, I would say, against the Wolf Rider. You mentioned the Screwjank Clunker, and I feel like that card was maybe meant to be more of a mid range, put to be meant to put in a mid range warrior deck. For example, like the stats are just 2/5, and it's not the most aggressive of cards. See, oh wow, Tides is actually considering hitting the Mech Warper here.
To reduce the
That's
cost, his opponent will be on 3 mana as well, correct? So he doesn't want him to get an early Pilot Shredder and completely destroy his board. That's
yeah.
reasonable, but it's also a really painful exchange considering that you're inviting him into like starting to take initiative against you. And now it's like, well, I need to draw Unleash the Hounds or else I'm going to lose this board completely.
Yeah. Not only do you have the Pilot Shredder on 4, but you also have the Screwjank Clunker on 4. The Screwjank is, after all, mech. So that's something we don't get to see very often. It's kind of like
Mhm.
sort of like a coined out Houndmaster, right?
Yeah, exactly. The Houndmaster, like, it's just the fact that it's so resilient against the board. And then you have like really good trades because you have weapons still, I believe. I'm not sure exactly because I guess I haven't really truthfully tuned into much of Life Coach's personal streams lately, but I have to imagine that you still have a lot of ability to be aggressive. And where do you top out at this deck, Monk? Like for the
Uh,
warrior deck?
I'm not really sure. I think Dr. Boom
Is it
and
Dr.
Grom.
Boom?
It's
Okay, I
Dr.
thought
Boom
Grom
and
was in there
yeah,
because if
yeah,
you have
and
Death
Grom.
Spite, you should be Grom. Okay,
I mean,
makes
like
sense.
with all of the quote unquote mech decks, you have Dr. Boom plus like the class legendary. So we see Archmage Antonidas plus Dr. Boom and Mech Mage. We see kind of Alec here and Dr. Boom in Mech Shaman sometimes. So I guess Grom makes sense, especially because it's such a good finisher in this deck. Now,
Yeah, makes sense.
normally when you're playing Face Hunter against one of these mech decks, you have like a few comeback cards or cards that kind of get you back into the game, or plays. So the first play is Knife Juggler into Unleash the Hounds at 5 mana. That usually clears the board somewhat and lets you get back initiative. The second is Explosive Trap, which also helps you race and helps you clear the board. And the very last one, the third one, is like a Knife Juggler or a Haunted Creeper on the board, and then you pop it with a Knife Juggler that you just put on the board. But unfortunately, we don't see any of those combinations from Tides, and he has yet to draw his Unleash the Hounds for that Knife Juggler combo.
Yeah, he's only got a couple of chargers and a few buffers. The Night Juggler here is so vulnerable, and he's going to hope for a really good trade here with the juggle. If it lands from the Warbot, that'd be really nice.
Oh,
Mm,
one of the worst options. Like, he wouldn't be sad if it landed
yeah,
on either the Warbot or the Divine Shield,
right.
but now this is going to be difficult.
Considering that it's really easy for warriors to start like weaponing, trading, doing really annoying stuff, Cruel Taskmaster. Oh, he's trading both. Pilot of Sky Golem coming out here and controlling the board, and there's no... Well, Fainting Trap isn't common at all, so that's why it's one of those things where Pilot of Sky Golem can have a huge impact considering how high of a life total both players are at.
Yeah. I think Piloted Sky Golem is one of Lifecoach's favorite cards, and maybe even his signature card. We see it in a lot of his decks, his Control Paladin, for instance, and he's even experimented it with Druid. And it's kind of it's really nice because it's kind of like a mini Savannah High main, and it's kind of giving a taste of their own medicine to these Hunter players.
Yeah, exactly, right? The fact that they can't deal with a 6 damage death rattle that has high impact both before and after death. Man, this is not feeling good for Tides at all. This Haunted Creeper can barely train into anything. He's looking at 17 damage just on board. Tides is just going to concede. This Mech Warrior deck takes a game. And you know what? It just slides into the back pocket, and Lifecoach doesn't have to worry about it for the rest of the series.
Yeah, I believe this Mech Warrior is now 2-0 in official tournaments, so maybe a competitive deck. We've been seeing Control Warrior. We've seen players like Zalay and Orange use Mid-Range Warrior. Then we have the Grim Patron Warrior that's kind of popping up on ladder. But is Mech Warrior the new Mech archetype?
Let's hope not, man. Actually, you know what? Let's hope so. I take that back. The fact that we can see other mech decks that aren't mage would be exciting to see. But at the same time, they all have the similar ideas, Monk. It's like, let's get Mech Warper and let's flood the board. It's like, oh, this class can buff it with 2/2. Oh, Priest can buff it with 3 health. It's like, all right, well, I get the idea. So while I do appreciate the coolness of the mech deck, it's one of those things where, like, I kind of wish I don't hit it on ladder, Monk. I don't know about you.
Well, you say that you hope to see more of this Mech Warrior and not so much of the Mech Mage, but, those two classes or those two decks aren't mutually exclusive because we do see a Mage in Lifecoach's lineup, and we do know that he loves his Mech Mage above anything else, so why not bring, like, almost a full Mech lineup?
Mech
Just imagine
Druid?
if you... Yeah, Mech Druid. That's also possible. I mean, you do have a Dog who has been experimenting with Mech Druid on the ladder for ever since Mechs came out, basically, ever since GVG came out. Fortunately, he hasn't done so well with it, so I don't feel like Lifecoach will be adapting his version of Mech Druid. Although, it is scary after all.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I think that's completely something that's on Tides' mind now that he knows Warriors out of the equation. And maybe that just allows him to queue up the hunter again, because then that gives him a good shot against his opponent's lineup now that warrior's out of the way. But it's so interesting that you queue up like warrior versus the hunter, and it's like, well, you're afraid that you might lose because it's a bad matchup, but then it's not the matchup you think it is. Oh, okay, so we're gonna have warrior versus mage, it looks like.
Uh, that I guess that makes sense. We'll definitely be seeing at least
Wait,
one warrior here.
unless both these guys somehow played warrior and the hands mirrored.
I'm not even sure how that happens. And they're using all
Yeah,
golden. They're both using
this
all
is
golden cards.
synchronized Hearthstone.
Yeah. So we do see the warrior player, and we know that Lifecoach was playing kind of a mech warrior. So this is going to be Tides playing the warrior versus, yeah, indeed a mage. Wow. I was surprised you could tell just by the little cutoff there.
Thanks, man. I can recognize that very thin and defined ab line from Jaina. It's very nice. All right, we got a pretty slow start here from the warrior. I guess we're still just going to be stuck on that POV for now. Apologize, but we don't really get to see the mage. But if it is the mech mage, Ty's not having weapons early on, specifically the fiery war axe. It's going to make it very hard if its opponent gets a quick start.
Yeah, as with all aggressive matchups, when you're playing warrior, you like the matchup just changes so much depending on whether you have the fiery war axe in your opening hand. If you do, the matchup is like 60-40 in your favor, and if you don't, the matchup is like 40-60 in your favor. It's kind of like having an Undertaker on turn one. If you do have that card on turn one, if you do draw it, or if you draw a Wild Growth on turn two, for example, your win rate just skyrockets. So even a simple thing.
Oh, there it is. Well, Monk. You know, actually, at the same time, the Snow Chugger might buy it enough time in which it might not be as impactful, right? You can still play Mech Warper and assume that you're safe to be able to benefit off of it next turn.
Yeah, I like I guess I kind of like Mech Mage as the design of a deck because it is vulnerable to weapons in the early Fire War Axe or maybe even like a Power Mace, but it kind of tempers that aggression or tempers that defense with minions that are kind of resilient to the Fire War Axe, like the Snow Chugger and a Noatron. So as for aggressive decks, as far as those decks go, it's pretty good design, I feel.
Yeah, both ways. You know, the fact that you can sequence it and make sure to do really cool stuff with Blingtron in certain mech mage decks, right? And you can have water elementals to freeze it. That kind of stuff is really interesting how you can, quote, control the RNG because it doesn't matter what weapon comes out of the Blingtron, you can still freeze the phase. That kind of stuff is really interesting. It's just that sometimes mech mage can just literally run away with the game through just having the nuts, and you're just completely powerless against it.
Oh, it's quite unfortunate. Lifecoach has to throw out a Mech Warper to die this War Axe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is actually might be better. Yeah, you pretty much give your opponent a Cruel Taskmaster, and basically you set up so that Fire War Axe can kill it off in the next turn. It's pretty good as well.
Mm-hmm. Although, I guess that would have been really awkward. No, I guess it would have been fine. I was like, if that was Counterspell, it would have been a little awkward because he would have to use 2 executes, but still, the job would have been okay because at worst, he would have contested the 4-2. Pilot Shredder comes down. Should be problematic, but he's got the Fiery War Axe. As long as nothing too problematic drops out of that thing, it'll be fine.
Oh, a Succubus. Yeah, I was just going to say, over the weekend when we were casting the Xfinity tournament, I believe 2 of these came out, and 2 Millhouse Mana Storms came out, so I guess it makes sense that yet another 4-3 would come out 4 tides a time. He might even have to be forced to expend his second execute, which is just so painful, especially when like that first piloted Sky Golem or Dr. Boom ever come out.
Right, exactly. And we do know that there are Dr. Booms and really big, heavy-hitting minions. You know, how does he ever deal with Antonitis or something either? Like, those are the finishing cards which Tides has to be worried about.
Yeah, if Antonice ever comes out, I feel like it's gonna be up to a rag shot, up to lucky rag, sniper rag, in order to fend it off and deal with it. Otherwise, Lifecoach is gonna just have that Antonice stick. We've seen both executes being used, and we've also seen a shield block being used. So it's gonna be hard to also activate this shield slam.
Well, I mean, this Sylvanas, like you said, needs to get some work done. But even so, I feel like there's not really too much. Like outside of that, you're going to be passing next turn if you're the warrior player. You don't have any play. So uncomfortable. Not to mention that if you do have a play and there's another mirror entity monk, what can you play? You only have Frag as your own minion. This is awful. Awful, awful.
Well, just as you say that, well, there's a Cruel
Okay.
Taskmaster. But here's the issue: what do you even Cruel Taskmaster if you do want to give your opponent this this minion? But I guess you have to maybe attack the Mechanical Yeti, Taskmaster it, armor, and then shield slam it. That sounds really terrible. Or you might as well, at this point, Cruel Taskmaster something random, and then Brawl, for instance. Both seem like pretty terrible plays, to be honest.
Well, Brawl it is. And if that Yeti survives, it's going to be a really bad spot. Tides is looking noticeably stressed.
Yeah, I would be too in this situation. No matter what comes out, you're in quite a bit of trouble.
Oh, man, that's really bad. Now it's like the Yeti. Well, at least he got rid of that mirror entity so Rag can come down. But that Yeti will at least get 8 damage in. Oh, Dr. Boom to follow it up.
Yeah,
I think
Dr.
Tides
Boom
is
on
hating
curve.
life right now.
I mean, I guess at least he has a decent rag shot. If the rag hits Dr. Boom, he's actually still gonna be in a pretty bad position because he's sitting on such low health, and he'll be facing up against a lot of boom bots as well. It seems like Lifecoach will just be able to flood the board on the very next turn, even if frag hits its destination.
Well, what do you do then? Is it Rag? Is it Gromosh? Is it... I mean, you're still in it at least. Your opponent has 2 cards remaining, and they could be spare parts and dead stuff. So, by all means, it's still doable, right? It's just really difficult. These boombots have to hit for 1. Rag has to hit Dr. Boom. Your opponent has to draw dead, and you have to draw into like Alex Straza.
Yeah, I think rag was almost certainly the play. And wow, hitting... I guess Tides gets some really good luck, followed by some extremely, extremely bad luck. We see by the quick actions that Lifecoach is taking that, yeah, he probably has lethal, and Lifecoach will go up 2-0 in the series.
Yep, just like that. Lifecoach is off to an excellent start, 2-0. Definitely where you want to be. Taking a look at his last deck, too, he's got Druid. That's going to be scary considering that Tides has to beat Druid, and more importantly, he still has Warrior remaining. He needed that Warrior to beat the Mech Mage.
Yeah, especially because Lifecoach, he'll probably be playing his patented Lifecoach / Nihilum Druid. And I've been playing a bit of that Druid on the ladder lately, and I found that it's just extremely favorable against Warriors. Normally against Warriors, Druid still has a favorable matchup, but that Nihilum Druid in particular, it has a Nourish added onto it. It has a Rag added onto it. It's just so much aggression that I feel like because Tides has Warrior, a Control Warrior in his lineup, he's going to be pretty far behind. That being said, he still even has to go through the Druid with his own Druid and a Hunter, so it'll be an uphill battle either way.
Yeah, I agree. I guess you just gotta get working. Just pick whatever you think is the best. If Tides is playing a greedier Druid, like sometimes he does, then he just goes Druid versus Druid. Maybe he goes Hunter versus Druid, and just try to Zerg him out and get a quick win. Maybe Tides is just so upset with how the draws and RNG has panned out, he just queues up Warrior and says, I have to win with this anyways. Might as well try and do my best, and if I don't, I guess I go home to Annie.
Yeah. I always find these positions interesting when one player is up 2-0 and the other player has to decide what to queue into. You can tell a lot about the player that way. Like, does he decide to queue in with his most favorable deck, which means he just wants to gain confidence for the next matches, or does he queue up with his least favorable deck? Does he just say, oh, I just want to get the series over with. If I lose this game, then oh well, I get to go home a bit earlier. It's getting into the psychology of the player.
Yeah, what about like middle of the road? It's kind of weird to think about, but I think it's pretty decent to explore that route as well. That's why I don't mind Druid versus Druid here. But maybe that is his best chance. Who knows? Have you made a decision about Hunter versus Druid yet, Monk? Because I know we were talking about it on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of players, or I would say most players think that it's Druid favored, but just judging by the matches that we saw over the weekend and over just the past few weeks, I've been seeing a pretty large percentage of Hunters winning. Maybe it's because of quick shot. Maybe it's because ladder Druids are more tailored against aggressive decks compared to tournament Druids. Of course, there are a lot more in tournaments. You can expect a lot more control than aggro. So Druids might just be tailored against those control decks and just forgetting about the aggro. Maybe that's the reason that Hunters are doing so well in tournaments lately against Druid. But a gun to my head, I would say that Hunter is favored.
All right. Well, I'm not doing that just yet, Monk. Not yet.
So looks you're like, saying that one day it'll come to that? You'll put a gun to my head.
Look, I don't want to promise anything. I don't want to say that your life is always guaranteed when you're next to me, Monk. Especially if it comes down to watching Lifecoach play too much Hearthstone and roping every single turn. But he's been playing well so far. He's got Wild Growth in his opening hands. Tides is going to go with the Hunter. And this deck, like you said, pushes out so much damage. It's so hard to keep up as a Druid player if you don't get the excellent start. But I think it's a pretty decent opening hand. If you have Rats, make sure to answer anything early, pick up Swipe, or maybe Innervate so that way you can pretty much push out anything against the counter aggression.
Yeah. Now, I said that the Nihilum Druid or Lifecoach's Druid was pretty good against Control Warrior decks, but it's also geared in a way that it's not very good against Hunter decks. It doesn't run any Zombie Challenge, for example, and that Nourish that's going to be in this deck is just going to be a fairly dead card.
Ooh. Yes, You're right. Look at that hand, though. He's got pretty much every answer that he wants, and it stacks for every point of damage, too. 1 to 4 damage, according to what he needs to match it. The Swipe not really for the 4 damage, but more for the collateral 1 damage AoE on everything else. Yeah, and Double Leopard Gnome is painful, but there is a chance for Druid to stabilize and really take a commanding lead if Tides starts slowing down a little bit.
Yeah, that being said, I feel like Blackrock Mountain has actually made this Druid slightly worse against Hunter. This Druid, Lifecoach has actually cut 1 Sludge Belcher for the Emperor Thorzen. If we are to go by previous tournaments. We don't have his deck list right now, but in some previous tournaments, the Nihilum players have cut that 1 Sludge Belcher for Emperor, and it's cutting pretty much an anti-aggro card for an anti-control card. So if Lifecoach just keeps up with that decision, we could see some pretty bad draws coming up for him. See these Rats, these hero powers. I guess you can consider swiping here, but then you leave up 2 1/1s that you're going to have a hard time dealing with as well. Keeper, you can set up the silence. You can set up a swipe with your Keeper as well, just silencing the Haunted Creeper. But with that play, you're taking at least 5 guaranteed more damage to the face, in addition to the Leopard Gnome Death Rattles, which add up to 4 more. So right now, Lifecoach can pretty much count himself at 17 health.
Well, looks like we're finally going to see the Hunter just do what Hunter does, which is hit the face and hero power. He's going to hold off and play around Swipe. I really like that hold from Tides. Just because you don't want to cash too all in to the point where you don't get guaranteed damage, because every Hunter card has to account for some kind of damage. I think you were telling me, Monk, it was like every card draws an average 2.5, right? Is that what it is?
Oh, I thought
Or
you
is
told me
that?
that.
Oh, did I tell you that?
Yes.
Maybe you planted it in my mind Inception style and made me think that I told you that, but in reality it was your idea.
Oh.
That sounds more plausible if you ask me.
Yeah, I guess I could do Inception-ish things. Of course it's plausible.
Oh, be careful how you enunciate that, Monk. You were very close to saying something else. Innervate to push out this Ancient of Lore, get the 5/5 and heal. Don't blame him whatsoever. Just a lot of pressure, and maybe you have an opportunity to use the 5/5 to race or contest. But these Leopard Gnomes, how much damage have they done? They've been alive since turn 1.
Yeah, they've both done 4 damage, and it's gonna be up to 6 damage each. And in
Eight
addition,
damage, yeah.
yeah, in addition to the death rattles, which haven't even procced yet. So yeah, these are gonna be the MVP Leopard Gnomes. Dish would be so happy.
I'll ask him. He's got the Borders playing to get over here. I'll tell him, what's the most damage you ever done with a Leopard Gnome? And I'll say, well, Tides did that twice. He did 8 damage each. Guaranteed. Now, of course, there might be more. Depends on how things pan out. But I have to imagine that Lifecoach wants to swipe this. It's just too much at this point. He's already down to 14 health, assuming, and you get hero power up to 15. The nice thing, though, is that he starts putting some pressure onto your opponent. You need to be able to race the Hunter down, because as much as you may be able to stop damage, you need to find a way to win.
Yeah, I really like that last play by Lifecoach, kind of foregoing the swipe, even though he had obviously set it up. Lifecoach saw that Tides was actually playing around the swipe by not developing anything. So he went with developing the Ancient of Lore instead to set up a swipe for the next turn. This also kind of telegraphs to Tides that, hey, I don't have a swipe, so please play into this. And now he has also an Ancient of Lore on the field to do a 5 additional damage to the face. Unfortunately, he basically traded 4 damage with the... He let himself get hurt by 4 more damage in exchange for 5 damage from the Ancient of Lore. This is
That's a good point.
Also an interesting play, just wrathing for 1 and then hero powering to the face. He knows in this matchup he has to be the aggressor, especially because his deck isn't geared towards defensive plays. Like it has double Azure Drake, but pretty much I believe only 1 taunter in the form of Sludge Belcher.
Yeah, he's going to need to get to those defensive cards or possibly even aggressive cards. If he just picks up Savage Roar and he starts counting down damage, 7, 13, and then from there it's like, okay, I have 1 or 2 more turns left. I can kill my opponent. Tides opting to play Knife Juggler, just to see if he can weave in those hero powers. Definitely on board. Just anything that can continue to weave in the hero powers, because you're still several points of damage away. And maybe turn 7, you have that 8-point or 9-point burst. So if you can get to that point, you're set. Maybe even sooner. Depends on what he draws next.
Yeah, this is an interesting card, actually. Druid of the Claw. Like, I mean, Druid of the Claw obviously is a staple in Druid decks, but it actually isn't a staple in Lifecoach Druid decks, so it's interesting that he put it out there. He puts it in taunt form, which
I don't mind.
It's gonna hurt him a bit because obviously there is the owl, but I don't think you can really play too much around owl against a hunter.
That's a fair point, actually. If you got that 4 damage in, he'd almost force Tides to have lethal, or yeah, he'd force Tides to have lethal or kill off the board, right? Because then that charge damage to the face. I mean, he's still in a position where it's difficult to get past this bear and do everything else, because the owl locks up enough mana that it's like things are awkward. You can't play Arcane Golem and Hero Power. Can't play Leroy, so it's just Quick Shot.
Yeah, the mana costs in Tide's hand are really lining up pretty awkwardly. These turns have actually been uncharacteristically pretty fast from Lifecoach. Maybe he has stuff to do, or maybe he's kind of learned.
Maybe Tide sent him a message saying, you know, if you actually rope too much, I will hunt you down in Germany and kidnap your firstborn sunshine. And of course, that would definitely be a film-worthy sequel of Taken 4. Liam Neeson would have to take it back because Lifecoach would reclaim him. Tide's going to go for the charge. on the Arcane Golem to try to deny his opponent from racing and killing. Zombie Chow is one of the worst draws in
Wow,
Lifecoach's deck.
that's really
Jeez.
interesting. Typically, Zombie Chow isn't in Lifecoach's Druid decks, but he's deemed it necessary to add it in. So he's just adapting to the metagame, I guess. Druid of the
Right.
Claw and Zombie Chow, they're two cards that are typically in normal Druid decks, but not in typical Lifecoach decks.
It's just not what you want to see right now. Like that Zombie Chow would have been, like almost anything else would have been beneficial because most things could have generated something. I guess Wild Growth would have been worse because he would have to wait another turn to play it. He can still drop the Zombie Chow here, but then does it play into Unleash the Hounds more? Another point of damage counting against him.
So Tides actually has 9 points of damage left in his hand, which means that 9 plus, how much can he get rid of this turn? So he can attack into the Owl, but that'll leave the Worgen on the board. So he basically needs to hero power here in order to survive.
Right, and that's assuming his opponent doesn't draw something that can also... I don't think there's anything else you can do more, right?
Yeah. Basically, if your opponent draws an Arcane Golem here, you've lost.
Right. Okay. Well, looks like he's alive for one more turn, but is Tides alive now? He might not be.
The answer to that is no. I don't see any way that Tides could survive, actually. I mean, that's just too much damage. He could Leroy into one of the creatures on the board, but that just gives your opponent more whelps to Savage Roar with.
Right, and you can't kill off your own Mad Scientist without Quick Shot, but that doesn't do anything. It doesn't stop the board. Wow, Lifecoach is going to 3-0 Tides to start off the day.
I mean, that is... Lifecoach has done pretty well in these league-type situations. He is, for example, 4-1 in the Kingwin Pro League. At one point, he was tied with Strifecrow as being the two only undefeated players. So, yeah.
Wow.
Tides...
Hunter is 1 point off lethal and has to trade with Leroy and going to lose 0-3.
Oh, no,
What a time to be alive.
Oh,
or, sorry, yeah.
He goes for the direct damage to the face, but he knows he's dead because that's... Yeah.
Like, it's too easy for your opponent to generate damage. So Savage Roar does it. Lifecoach wins the series, and Tides, I mean, he's not really making any... I mean, Hunter just straightforward, right? You're just trying to do the damage. You're just trying to put on the pressure. There's some uncomfortable situations where you might have to trade and calculate, but for the most part, I felt like Lifecoach made some really cool plays that set it up for him to be successful. That Innervate into the Ancient of Lore to abstain from the swipe comes to mind, but I think there's a lot of small things that he did that set him up for success that I'm very impressed with.
Yeah, I was really impressed at how he played that last game, the Druid versus Hunter. He had the mentality that he just couldn't play defensive all game. Like, for example, swiping on turn 4 would be a very defensive play. He had to find some way to put on the aggression back on the Hunter with like plays like that Ancient of Lore instead of swiping, and then swiping to the face after, when I guess the more obvious play and the more defensive play would be swiping the Knife Juggler and hero powering. Just getting that extra 3 damage onto the face was pretty crucial, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that wraps up our first series of the day, Monk. We have a good list of matches for you. Actually, who's our next series, you know?
Yeah, we're going to have Kalento versus 6-0 up directly after this, and 6-0, again, he'll be playing from the C-Story Clubhouse, so that'll be pretty interesting.
That's right.
Yeah,
he was telling me that he didn't know what decks that he was going to pick, so maybe he's deciding through random draw right now.
Yeah, maybe he just asked all the other players, how do I beat Kalento?
All right, sounds good. So guys, Kalento versus 6-0 is coming up next. Don't go anywhere. More action from the NVIDIA Hearthstone Pro Tournament continues right after this.